Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Wasn't expecting to wake up this morning with my family to some pretty big news out of the tennis world involving the women's number 2 player in the world. Without delaying the suspense, and I'm sure you're seeing it, I'm going to let Jon Wertheim fill us in on the details. Jon, what are you hearing about this situation with Iga?
Yeah, you've heard of the Friday news drop when unfavorable news gets dropped, so it gets obscured by the news cycle on the weekend. This is the Thanksgiving news drop. So we all woke up to the news that Iga Świątek, 5-time major winner, 2023 anyway, the highest earning female athlete in the world, had a positive doping test from this summer. I'm going to look down. I think accuracy much more important than optics, but let's just kind of run through the facts of the case, which is she tested negative when she was tested during the Olympics, then went to Cincinnati, out of competition tested positive in Cincinnati, then negative at the US Open. That was on August 12th was the date of the test, and she was in her hotel room, had trouble sleeping. She had taken what appeared to be melatonin. They sell it at Trader Joe's. We later learned that was tainted. So right after the US Open, a month after this test, September 12th, she's notified of this positive result because she is... she has the resources partially, and also this is the playbook. You send out the medication to a lab, and it was determined that indeed it was contaminated with TMZ, a banned substance that if you look it up, a sort of obscure substance used to treat angina. There were trace amounts. Melatonin usually leaves the body very quickly, but what happened, she was having trouble sleeping, and apparently this anti-doping test came at 7 a.m. before the substance could leave her body. So it turns out that immediately she began serving a suspension. Remember, we were told in September she was taking time off, and she had a statement that led us to believe she was, that the schedule was too long and she was sort of preserving herself. We now know that this was a 22-day suspension. In the interim, it was revealed that indeed this was a contaminated substance, and it does seem as though ITIA does not contest that. So this is a contaminated substance. This was an out-of-competition test. It was for melatonin, which most of us, either we take it or we have easy access to it. This is not an obscure substance. She agreed to take an additional 8 days suspension during essentially the off-season. So it's basically a 30-day suspension. It does not seem as though there's fault or guilt here. The statement certainly mitigates any sort of culpability, but it's really unfortunate. And, I think there are a number of angles we can take here, and I'm sure Andy and I will in the next few days. One thing that strikes me, this is administered and imposed by the ITIA, the International Tennis Integrity Agency. Keep an eye on the word integrity. It does a lot of lifting here. Integrity means, the honor and the integrity of competition, no match fixing, no doping. That's great. That's what we all want. But I think there also has to be integrity in doping protocols. And what we have here for the second time in 100 days is a top player who had trace amounts of a substance. Sort of the facts of the case just don't align with just sort of common sense, don't necessarily align with cheating. Again, Iga Świątek with $25 million in the bank in Cincinnati, and she's it's highly unlikely she's going to for both moral and practical reasons. It just doesn't make sense that there would be a legitimate infraction here. And, I think either tennis has a really, really bad doping problem where even major winners, multiple major winners, top of their sport, they're doping out of competition. Or, and I think this is more probable, there's a real problem with the way the protocols are administered. And a lot of players are sort of getting caught in this dragnet. We learned that there are extenuating circumstances later, but what is it about tennis where top players are getting popped on these tests for very, very trace amounts? And it's a bad look for the sport. We talk about contaminated substances, they're contaminated reputations as well. I also think it's really problematic that players are being put in a position where they have to lie. We saw this with Sinner, and to some extent we saw this with Iga as well, where she says, look, I'm taking some time off and I need to relax and recover. Obviously not revealing the real reason behind this. I don't blame her at all. That is a system that is set up. Again, Andy and I will do a deeper dive. We can take this in a lot of different directions. What does this mean for Jannik Sinner is sort of an obvious way to go. If Iga Świątek is getting 30 days for tainted melatonin, I don't know what that does for Sinner, whose case obviously is under appeal and hopefully we'll hear soon from the from CAS, the Court for Arbitration in Sport. And just I worry about Iga. This is apart from being a top player, this is someone who, by her own characterization, is introverted. She doesn't necessarily like confrontation. You wonder how she's going to deal with the adverse publicity and some of the questions that come from a situation like this. It's trafficking an understatement. It is highly suboptimal. I mean, the good news here is that there doesn't seem to be any dispute about what happened. It was a tainted melatonin. It tested positive for trace amounts of this obscure TMZ. It was out of competition. She tested negative at the Olympics, negative at the US Open. Highly improbable that there's anything nefarious going on here, but it's still something she has to deal with. Andy and I will try and do some independent reporting in the next few days, and we'll have more to say here. But this is not news anybody wanted to wake up to on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think the big questions for me, right, are how does this compare, like you said, to a Sinner case? How does it compare to WADA's now reaction to the Sinner case versus something like this? But ultimately, right, like it sounds like she took a plea deal essentially, right? If you're just saying American court case deals, just to be like, all right, like we all agree this is ridiculous, I'll take time served. But essentially taking a plea deal that admits fault, so taking a 30-day suspension, so then she can move on with her life, right? Is that kind of the vibe that it is, instead of being like, no, this is ridiculous and fighting it? Because what does that look like if you want to fight it and be like, I never did, I don't want this on my record, because technically it goes on her record, right? As like she said that it was a bad substance, even though it was contaminated, it was in her system, it was wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. I mean, she has an avenue. I mean, she has a recourse to fight this. But my strong suspicion here is that exactly what you said. You essentially take a plea deal. Again, if you read her statement, read the WTA statement, you read what the ITIA appears to have conceded here, this is not a great reputational stain. And rather than fight this and try and get a complete exoneration, essentially try to get this completely scraped from her record, she'll take the 30 days. I mean, it's kind of a meaningless suspension. The 22 of these days were already essentially time served in the fall when she was clearly on low reserves anyway. 8 days in the off season, she'll put it behind her, she'll go to Australia, she'll be able to say it's all in the past. Again, it's one of these things. I think we've said it before. It's like Winston Churchill on democracy. Like it's a terrible system, but we're not sure what the better one is. But between sort of getting popped for what clearly seems to be, at least by the press releases we've been given, what clearly seems to be inadvertent contamination, again, from melatonin that I can walk downstairs from my apartment and get it at Trader Joe's in 10 minutes.
But melatonin is a prescribed substance in Poland.
In Poland, yeah.
Can we just pick a country to decide what's prescribed and what's not, and at least start there? Like, I think that's the insane thing about a lot of this stuff is, it's some stuff is over the counter. So where do you draw the line? Like, I couldn't imagine losing my livelihood because I was trying to get a few extra hours of sleep for something that stays in your system for 5 hours. So you literally do something and get tested for something almost immediately after taking it. It's crazy.
Yeah, these are all great points, and I think again, this is a global tour, and we're asking the athletes to get from the Paris Olympics to Cincinnati, Ohio. Yeah, you're going to have jet lag. I mean, it's just it's easy to pick apart the flaws here. I'm sort of hung up on the process of this all. I mean, this does not seem to adhere to the same process as Sinner. Again, the fact that athletes are being put in a position where they have to speak untruth, I think is less than ideal. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, the good news here is I think most people, at least, again, we're going by press releases. So, I mean, that's the caveat. But you read the press releases, and it does seem as though there's no disagreement that this was inadvertent. This was not an attempt to subvert competition. It wasn't an in-competition test. All the sort of the fact pattern would suggest innocent mistake here, and a contamination that doesn't seem to be disputed. But yeah, it's not a great headline for tennis. It's not a great situation for top players to have to deal with. It's sort of we probably should do this guardedly, but it seems natural to wonder how this impacts if we see this decision, the Sinner decision, through these sets of circumstances. I don't know. She gets 30 days for contaminated melatonin. I'm not sure he skates, but that's speculation, and a lot of angles here. Not the Thanksgiving news I think anyone wanted to wake up to, but here we are.
Yeah, well, we'll dive into this more. Like you said, John and Andy will dive into this more on our normal Tuesday show next week, and hopefully we can get somebody on that's maybe a little bit smarter than all of us and can share a little bit more information potentially from either the legal side of all of it, and maybe even broader strokes about how this all unfolds behind the scenes, and maybe not exactly in Iga's case, but hypothetically how something like this would have unfolded, since that positive test. I think that's something everyone in our comments section is always asking, is for more clarity on this. And it's like, we all want more clarity. I think the players want more clarity. The people trying to form unions want more clarity. I think even these governing bodies want more clarity amongst each other. So hopefully we can dive more into that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of angles. You say clarity when you're Iga Świątek and you can hire top legal counsel and immediately the playbook, you order the substance, you send it to a lab. The guy ranked number 250 that's subject to the same code doesn't necessarily have that wherewithal or those financial resources. So yeah, I mean, this is a reality of sports today, but clearly some process issues here that need to be addressed and tightened.
All right, John, go get some Thanksgiving dinner in you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Very good.